So 2021 has brought us Candyman, the new film, remake, reboot, sequel, whatever you want to call it, of the 1992 film Candyman.
This is where it all began. The story of Candyman.
Yes, I'm fully aware that this is the second movie in 2 weeks where I've shot through mirrors, but it made sense with The Night House, and it makes sense with Candyman. So here we are, shooting through mirrors again. I like this movie. I think it's solid. I think it's well made. I think it's pretty good, and it has a very strong message, which we can get into more. On the surface, it's a okay movie in terms of the characters, the story, the storytelling, the structure. Everything is okay. There's nothing that stands out particularly. The main character isn't that interesting, and it's because he ends up being the Candyman. He is basically a blank slate meant for the Candyman to come into, more or less, which again, we can explain more of that later. But he's not that interesting of a character. He's the tortured artist. He sets up a display that says, "Say the Candyman," in an art show, and Candyman is summoned and horror ensues. He's a pretty simple character. The story is pretty simple. What it turns into is more interesting, and that's for better and worse. There are two main twists. One that directly links to the first movie, which I don't want to spoil, that I liked, and it came out of nowhere, and it was surprising, and it works. The second twist has to do with another character who is intentionally putting our main character in harm's way, to be vague. And the twist of what he's doing, who he is, and what he's trying to accomplish is sloppy. And it feels like it's rushed and put into the movie to simply get to this ending, to this message that is strong, but it feels sloppy. It feels like it is just put in there to quickly get to the ending, and I didn't care for that too much. And the final negative of this movie is the pacing. It's only an hour and a half, but there are some stretches that I found to be a little bit too dull. Now, it peppers in these hyper-violent sequences that help the story along, and it kind of hobbles into its climax, but it does feel dull, and that may be because the main character is just not that interesting. What he's doing is essentially identical to what the first movie's main character was doing, but in a less interesting way. He's an artist that feels connected to this area, so he starts learning about the area and the Candyman. The first one's about a university student, professor, undergrad, can't remember, who goes to Cabrini Green to research urban legends, and then she becomes wrapped up in the urban legend. This one is less about that and more about our main character more or less becoming the urban legend and the slow decay into that. And that story just isn't that interesting for a couple of stretches. It does get better in spurts, but the pacing, I think, could have used some work, even though it's only 90 minutes.
I brought him back.
Candyman isn't real. He chose you. He has purpose for you.
Tell everyone.
New to the neighborhood.
That ends the negatives. The positives of this movie are mostly with its messaging. I think the message of this movie is quite good. I think it drives it home in a really satisfying way at the end with the Candyman and how they use the Candyman as a sort of icon for martyrdom. It's about Black lives and Black culture and how people are getting killed unjustly, and through their deaths, they're becoming more than they were. They're becoming these legends. And that's what this whole movie is leading towards, and the whole movie is about. And I enjoyed that message, and it delivers it in a really satisfying way at the end.
We tried to bring out the connection with the fact that this is an epidemic of violence on Black bodies in this country.
The last few things I wanted to bring up is the performances, which I thought were across the board very good. The original Candyman has a couple hit and miss performances. The leading two are great, but there's a couple that are eh. This one's consistent. All of the performances I think are really, really good in this, and some of them are, characters at least, are more interesting than others, but they're solid performances, and the way it's made is also very clean, very professional, very polished. It's a little bit odd considering the original Candyman is known for its grimy, kind of gross cinematography and locations, because it puts you in the shoes of the people that are being attacked by the Candyman. It's putting you into their environment. It's making you empathetic for them because you see their poor living conditions. And in this one, most of it takes place in art galas and top-of-the-line apartments in Chicago. It's very rarely in those grungy areas, but it is very polished and very professional looking since it's not in those areas. It does its job. It's well made, I think.
And the story that resonated to me now is the story of my fear of the white space.
The music is like wallpaper. I hardly even noticed that it was happening, unlike the original, which has this operatic music that's amazing. Unfortunately, a lot of this just is kind of unmemorable. For a movie that is as memorable as the 1992 Candyman, this one just kind of isn't. There's a couple things. The climax is interesting for better or worse, and the performances are good, but all in all, it's just like a kind of fine while you watch it type movie. It leaves a strong message, a strong impression in that sense, but outside of that, there really isn't a lot other than that. So I'd give it a 6. Solid 6. It's enjoyable. It has some rough patches, but it is an okay horror movie, and it has a strong message, so that's good. Okay, bye-bye.